My name's Anna Starling and I'm a Policy Fellow at the Health Foundation, and today I'm going to talk about the Multi-Specialty Community Provider Framework. We all know that health services have to change to meet the challenges of an ageing population and more people living with long-term conditions. That includes breaking down the historical divides between primary, community, mental health, acute and social services, and bringing specialised care closer to home. That's why the multi-specialty community provider model is important, and why the Health Foundation was encouraged by the publication of the MCP framework earlier this summer. The framework does recognise, though, that an MCP can't simply be willed into being because of the complexity and scale of the changes required, and that's an important point.
So, my name is Michael Lorry. I'm an analyst in NHS England, and I'm overseeing the evaluation of the New Care Models programme. So I've been asked to talk about what a logic model is to begin with. Well, a logic model, it comes from the field of programme evaluation, policy and programme evaluation. It's a methodological tool that most evaluations will use. The government sort of recommends their use when one comes to evaluate a piece of work you're doing. Logic models are based on the premise that at their heart every programme or policy or intervention is a theory of change. It's a theory of doing things better or addressing a social challenge or a social ill. And a logic model is an attempt to encapsulate this theory of change into a diagram, into a single diagram. It links the inputs to that programme, so the resourcing or the skills that have maybe gone into it, with the activities that are being funded. What is the programme actually doing? Is it a training programme? Is it, as with the New Care Models, is it trying to bring in population health approaches? With the end benefit that those programmes deliver. So it links those three concepts together inside one diagram, which then has a range of other uses thereafter. At the beginning of the programme, a year or so ago, we asked all the Vanguard sites to produce a logic model. We got some support from commissioning support unit led teams to help them to do that. I think at the start of the programme, some of the proposed interventions and some of the parts of the care model that we were looking at had weaker evidence base in the academic literature. So developing a logic model helped sites to think through the potential benefits that those could be delivered. It also focused the sites or the Vanguard's minds on where the evidence might be available for some of the interventions they were proposing. Another aspect of by focusing the Vanguards on their logic models, it helped them to potentially decide where spending the money might be better, or what interventions might deliver more benefit than others. And that was certainly something that was considered as well. I think finally as well, we always wanted the programme to be well evaluated. With the spread of the New Care Model certainly at the top of the agenda, we need to know that they work, and we need to know how they're working. And so we wanted from the beginning there to be evaluation at the heart of the programme, and the logic model approach is a very sensible first step of any evaluation. So that was the other reason we procured that support too. Okay, so where can you go to produce one of these? Well, from the centre, from us, there are, we've learned things about producing logic models through the Vanguard programme. So the first place to look is the Vanguard logic models, and we can make sure that they're easily accessible. We've learned about the process as well, and there's a learning paper produced there. But that's only going to take you so far. I think what I'd advise is to start thinking about evaluation an analysis of your programme from the beginning. How are you going to measure, in effect, if what you're proposing has worked? So to do, you might want to find out people who can do evaluations for you, and the obvious place to start are your local universities. But we know that the commissioning support units can help with this too. Academic health science networks, and there's also consulting firms who specialise in this sort of work too. So there's plenty of expertise out there who can help you to begin with. Okay, so a good logic model. I think the first thing to say is that there's no one template or one definition. I think if you look online, starting with the Magenta book, the Treasury Magenta book, the Cabinet Office Magenta book, you'll find lots of good examples, and also the Vanguard programme's produced a large number of good examples too. I'd say the first thing, a good logic model, it's very clear, it looks nice, it's got good communication value. A logic model has that purpose for sure. The second thing to say is that it links the start and the end of your intervention. So I think you should begin by talking about what's the problem, what's the challenge to be addressed, and using evidence to articulate that challenge. So I think there should always be a rationale or challenge section. Then I think you should set out where you sort of want to go. What's the end impact of your programme? And the example I think that's being flashed up is it shows that. Crucially, and I think this is probably the most important bit, that the incremental change between that challenge and an end benefit should be really closely thought through. So you might term them sort of intermediate outcomes or intermediate benefits of the programme or intervention. The reason that's probably the most important part of your logic model is because the long-term benefits are not going to be discernible for, in most cases, for a long time. So what you want some interim measures, things that you can use to show that you're on the right track. Finally, I'd really recommend each component of your logic model should have a metric or indicator attached to it. So what data source or you might look at to discern whether something has whether an intermediate outcome has been delivered. So for example, if you want to look at a change in the use of acute services, you might look at bed days or emergency admissions as your way of measuring whether that's been delivered. So that, I think, is what a good logic model might look like, and there's plenty online to use as examples. I'd really emphasise there's also the way that the logic model is produced is almost as important as the end product. If you get the right people around the table for your programme at the right time, early in the programme when your care model's at a sort of nascent stage in its development, if you get analysts, policy people, programme leads, of course clinical staff around the table to think through the detail of what how you might go from A to B. We found in the Vanguard programme, but that had massive benefit for the programme itself. So yeah, there's definitely benefit to the end product, but we really think there's benefit to the process of developing the logic model as well.
To succeed, it is essential that teams are supported to build their improvement and learning skills. It will also require creating cultures of learning that allow staff to challenge assumptions and innovate. This is something we've seen in the improvement projects the Health Foundation sponsors around the country. As the programme progresses, it will be crucial to encourage vanguards to share their learning about successes and failures. It is in this way that communities can be supported to change the way they deliver care for the future.
Well, an MCP is a provider that brings together primary care services, community services, social care in a transformed way, and it's about bringing those services together on a population basis, so that in the case of Dudley, the way we look at this, it's about bringing teams of people together for a shared responsibility for the same shared population. For us, it starts with the patient registered with a practice, and we've organised our model of care around that basis, because in the NHS everyone is registered with a GP, and they look to the GP as the lead coordinator for the care in the community. And we've designed the services around the themes that the population are looking for from us, which is about better access to services through their GP initially, or their GP services associated with that. It's about better continuity of care around long-term conditions management, and it's also about better coordination of care, particularly for those people with complex needs. And all of that starts with a patient registered with a practice, which is why we've developed an MCP model which has general practice at the heart of it. Well, for us it starts with the patient registered with a practice, and we've organised our model of care around that basis, because in the NHS everyone is registered with a GP, and they look to the GP as the lead coordinator for the care in the community. And we've designed the services around the themes that the population are looking for from us, which is about better access to services through their GP initially, or their GP services associated with that. It's about better continuity of care around long-term conditions management, and it's also about better coordination of care, particularly for those people with complex needs. And all of that starts with a patient registered with a practice, which is why we've developed an MCP model which has general practice at the heart of it.
So from a patient perspective, can you give an example of how this works?
Well, if you take a patient with complex needs, they don't want a siloed response. They want a response that deals with their whole needs. So in Dudley and in many MCPs, we've developed multidisciplinary teams based in the community, which is coordinated by the GP, but includes a social worker, a mental health worker, a district nurse, a pharmacist, also particularly important links to the voluntary sector. And what those teams do is they work as one for a shared group of patients to take a shared responsibility. And because they're working as one team, they're able to provide a holistic response that meets their whole needs as a person, again, rather than an individual siloed response. Well, I think if you look at the last decade and a half, what we saw was a transformation of secondary care, which really delivered phenomenal improvements in, for example, waiting times, but also in terms of outcomes. And what the MCP is about is the transformation of the other half of the system. In the past, we've had all those services separated, disconnected, not as one, and the MCP brings together all of those disconnected services to create a transformed primary and community service.
Looking at the multi-speciality community provider from a patient perspective, I would hope there will be advantages in the future, so that with all of those organisations, both from the NHS and the council, together with voluntary organisations all working together, that hopefully if I ever need support as a patient with long-term conditions, that whoever I talk to first, whether that's a voluntary sector group or it might be my GP more realistically, that I'll only have to tell my story once, as all the records will be shared. So if I've had x-rays or scans, they'll be able to be accessed by anybody. I'll also have my own records because I want to take responsibility for my own health, so that I'm as fully informed as possible. So I see the MCPs as really pioneering that way, really getting organisations to really work together, so that I won't get what sometimes happens, oh well, we can't do that, you'll have to go back to your GP again and get referred elsewhere, but that somebody will link me with something or help me access that from elsewhere. The other thing that I think is different about the MCPs and the other vanguards is the desire to really work with patients, people in their communities at a very early stage, to have them help inform what is decided, what does get changed, how things work. I know that as somebody with quite a lot of lived experience now of different conditions, that I see things differently as a patient, and I'd like to share what I see with the people who are designing or changing how things might be. So I think it's really important to engage your patients, public and the communities you serve at the very earliest opportunity in a really meaningful way. And this is different to just ordinary consultation or ordinary engagement. And I think whether you call it co-design or co-production, it really is the way to go, because it really does make a difference. I do some work with the Coalition for Collaborative Care and sit on the People and Communities Board, where working obviously with the voluntary sector and in partnership with patients and the public is absolutely crucial and will help make those shifts, both for efficiencies, so that things aren't provided which aren't necessary or duplicate, but also to get that quality right. So that it's really about what matters to me in my life. And to help that, there is a model that's been developed by the Coalition for Collaborative Care and the NHS, a very simple one side of A4, looking at the values and principles. So for any, whether that's a group, organisation, or for parents or for patients to share as well, that can helpfully be a starting point. I would hope that in the future, all of the work that's being done will mean that there will be better quality of support, whether that's in organisations or from groups, and that it will be not only integrated but it will be coordinated as well, and really help me in what matters to me.